Life doesn't have meaning, right? And that's something that I actually still subscribe to over art. Like, just, I believe there's no reason for existence. We're just here. We also create our own kind of meaning, I feel like. What would you say, what is your take on nihilism in the context of how we're living and what we're doing as artists? Would you subscribe to nihilism, or do you say it, or do you not believe it? Like, what does that mean to you?
For me, everything I know about nihilism has been through zines. But what's funny is, the zine that I read about nihilism was actually a kind of like study of like nihilism from Russia, like the Russian nihilists. And actually in Russia, they were extremely autonomous. They were direct action oriented. There was a lot of movements, the nihilist movements that they, propagated were like very anarchistic, very like fucking shit up in really intense ways, like probably way more intense. And you wouldn't really associate nihilism with like movement, right? Because generally when people think about nihilism, it's like, what is the point of doing any of these things? What is the point of, so that was my introduction to nihilism. I'm probably way more interested in like, I guess, well, maybe the black, maybe not the Western ideation of like nihilism so much as like Afro-pessimism I'm very big on that, and like just black perspectives of like humanity, and just like not acknowledging like what is human to black and indigenous people, what is like humanity and statehood mean. I have written social theory about that, and then also there is like more theory heavy examples of, I guess, like Afro-pessimism and what that means, and particularly like uncivilized or savage or enslaved people's ancestral relationships to the nation state. Like, why are we subscribing to any kind of like ideas or identity that or inclusion into that? So like, if you're thinking about like a nihilist perspective, I think like it could be like refusing like what is being offered to you by like the larger apparatuses that are oppressing us. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about nihilism as a kind of springboard for other things, that I understand it, and especially the way you've just described, especially coming from marginalized people, black, brown, just any queer, any marginalized people, that there's a certain amount of rejecting everything that has to happen before you can start building, and that's kind of what it happens for me, is that I'm not nihilist, as the word is, but I believe that it's a useful piece of the puzzle. It's a useful piece to. I think just also, it's kind of stretching the point, but in making music and art, you're communicating with people, and you're trying to say things in a different way. I mean, that's my whole thing, is that I want communication, and I don't want to push people away. I want to bring people in, but I also don't want to say it in the way it's been said before. And so, you can have nihilism, being this, that I just don't want to have anything to do with what that is, but I can use humor, or I can use light, I can use things like that are, you wouldn't associate with nihilism, to a little more seductive, to get people to accept your nihilism. I think it is part of the equation in punk, definitely so, nihilism, and an important one
Yeah.
to have, because it is questioning everything. We should question everything.
How about you, Byron?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think there's a liberation in it. I think there's a freedom to rejecting these things that we're given and within nihilism, and realizing that there is nothing, but also creating that, as you said before, just creating something and rebuilding hope, or rebuilding your life and rebuilding the world. And I think that within everything that we're saying in terms of rejection, in terms of nihilism, in terms of accepting, I think for me, one of the most liberating things in my life was accepting that there is no meaning in the world. And I think especially growing up Christian and having these like ideas put into my mind, it was the liberation that I found when I rejected that, when I realized that there being nothing doesn't have to be scary, that it can really truly be whatever I want it to be. And I think for me, that's how I see it. But it's all embedded in all these different things that we've all talked about and all discussed, that was rooted for me in punk and in zines. Like zine culture is what is my foundation of education. So I think zines are so powerful.
Same.
Yeah.
I think there was a really great quote that I from a Palestinian prisoner that was hope is not a criterion for resistance, and for me that means you can resist, and there's some people's conditions that are so terrible. When I think about our ancestors who were enslaved, I think about what does it mean to resist in those kinds of particular conditions? You might not get out alive, but you can still fucking resist, so
and resistance, right? Something that I've heard, and it's I've heard in punk and queer spaces, a phrase that I've heard often is resistance is existence, and as queer people of color, as musicians and artists, as people just in the community, what is it that keeps you existing?
What keeps me resisting?
Existing. Why?
Resisting. The hope that things could possibly change, even though in the face of insurmountable evidence that it's not going to, but I have to create a space and I think a world for myself that has some kind of hope in it, and a lot of that is resisting these oppressing forces, that will keep me going, and I think, and also it is something ingrained in me that there's no choice.